Goeiedag. Soos bekend gestel, ek is Mthunzi Mdwaba. Ek is oorspronklik van Heschel in die Ooskaap. Ons praat natuurlijk 4 tale, namelijk Xhosa, Sotho, Afrikaans en Engels. Ek sal nie in Afrikaans aanbied, want baie oefening is deesdae nodig. Laat ek net sê, ek is 'n behoorlike plattelandse seun. So, good afternoon. I haven't had much practice with speaking Afrikaans for a while, or this is what I use to change things, is it? Okay. So, but thanks to growing up there, I speak quite a few languages. A little bit of French, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Russian, a little bit of many things. And I see the presidency is here, current, the past, so all the leadership that's here. I think the DG's gone out. Somebody will tell him I also recognized him. Ladies and gentlemen, it's quite funny when you come where I come from the rural villages. And I'm reminded, only last night, Lindy, I was thinking that when I was in standard, what was it now, grade something was standard 10, metric. I realized for the first time that I couldn't actually get into university if I were to continue doing maths and science. So I was getting an A for maths, which is quite easy because my grandfather was a whiz kid in mathematics. Some people may have heard of T.W. Kambule, was my grandfather. But the science part, especially chemistry and other things, we didn't have a lab in the rural villages. I just hated it. So I would get an E. So then I thought, I have a problem with university. So only in matric, I decided to change. My grandfather said over his dead body, there's no way I'm changing maths. And then my aunt said, well, we can always organize that. And so thanks to my aunt, I was able to change. And guess what I had to do to change? You could only do maths and science or agriculture and biology. So only in March of my final year in matric, I changed to agriculture and biology. And thanks to that, I was able to get into vets. Otherwise, I never would have made it. So thanks to agriculture. So many years later, I thought, it's been a very useful kind of tour for me. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to speak on a topic that all of you know better than me. The only advantage, I think, as Lindy said, is that in my previous life, I was the vice president of all business in the world in Switzerland. I used to represent over 150 business organizations until June of 2021. I used to speak for over 50 million companies. I was the first African, actually, to be the vice president of the International Organization of Employers, which was born in 1920. So 2017, when I did that, there'd never been an African for strange reasons. I also was the first vice chairman of the International Labour Organization. I don't know if some of you have heard of the ILO, maybe because it's just after lunch. Could I get an indication that you know what the ILO is? So that I don't throw little things and then I'm losing, especially the Free State guys who are close to where I come from at home. They might be completely lost. So, yeah, or they know the ILO. So I was vice chairman of the ILO, and it therefore meant that, the ILO is made up of labor, business, and government. So you have 3 chairs. Like here you have 1 chair for Agri SA. We have 3 doing work that is shared, and only when the 3 of us agree are we able to then say we have an agreement. So that is my background. But today I'm speaking wearing multiple hats, and I'm going to try and beat the clock. I'll see if I can do that, because I see now it's going quite frantic. I was invited, and I think it's only fair that I share this with you. I was invited here as the chair of Productivity SA, but the minister and I are in a big war at the moment, Minister Ngesi, Employment and Labor. He thinks he's removed me as chair of Productivity SA, so some people say you must never interfere with an enemy when he's making a mistake. So as unlawful as it is, we'll continue to let him do what he wants to do. But in the meantime, I thought, let me talk as the chair of the South African Norwegian Association, rather, so that I don't provoke anybody unduly and unnecessarily. But the South African Norwegian Association, very quickly, you will see, is made up of a board of South Africans and Norwegians, was launched during the COVID in 2020 at Westgrow. Some of you may have heard of Westgrow in Cape Town. And they are partners and members. And now we also have a partnership with Invest SA and the GGDA in Joburg. And last week, I actually chaired a conversation at TIKZN, Trade Investment KwaZulu-Natal, whilst I was also attending BRICS with my team. And this, for me, couldn't have come at a better time because only a week ago, when we had this conversation, we started talking about agriculture. Some people were talking about aquaculture. So I actually thought at 4 a.m. yesterday when I put these slides through, so if there's a lack of coherence, know that they were done at 4 a.m., I thought, let me talk about agriculture and aquaculture together at the same time, because you all know what agriculture is. It's a practice of cultivating and raising animals and producing crops. You all know that. Its primary goal, as we've heard this morning and conversations I've had yesterday, is to produce to meet the needs of human populations involving a combination of science, technology, traditional knowledge to optimize the use of natural resources while minimizing negative environmental impacts. I mean, we also heard this morning that we are the third highest adopters of technology in South Africa, which for me I think is amazing from an innovation point of view in terms of productivity and maybe even competitiveness. But productivity and competitiveness is not only up to us, it's also up to the people that we seek to collaborate with, but sometimes it's up to people we don't necessarily seek to collaborate with, but are forced to collaborate with, whether we like it or not. So I then also thought, we know the role it's played, very critical in shaping societies and economies around the world, very diverse and complex industry that employs millions around the world. I was told last night that it employs about 180,000 people in South Africa. It contributes about 2 to 3% to the GDP of this country, but everybody said it could contribute a lot more. Everybody feels that instead of 880,000, we could actually double that number quite easily. Similarly, I thought, let me mention aquaculture because it covers also the farming of both animals, crustaceans, in this case, fish, that's a mistake, and mollusks and plants, including seaweeds. But aquaculture, especially when I've had the conversation, has gained a lot of popularity later and has grown rapidly in recent years due to its sustainability and efficiency. It now accounts for a significant portion of the world's seafood production. I don't have time to go into it, and some of the Norwegian people we're connected to had a lot of opportunities they shared with us that they think South Africa could very easily grow without too much of a fuss. There's challenges in that space. But the reason I wanted to raise it is because it can also empower the youth by promoting enterprises and creating opportunities. A lot of the youth I speak to love agriculture, but a lot of the youth I speak to love aquaculture. They say it makes them look cool. They feel cool. Okay? So the question for me was, how do we instill coolness to both agriculture and aquaculture to ensure certainty, impact, and employability so that we are to do the things that we are talking about in ensuring that we have the certainty of food and all of that? Because the reality is that young people like to be cool, whether you like it or not. They have to be cool. They have to identify with what's happening. We complain about people who go into agriculture. I think this gentleman said earlier from the Free State, some people go into agriculture not because they want to, but because it's a fallback place. That's sort of easy, like me in matric. That I did agriculture. How do we place people, planet, and progress at the heart of markets and also achieve sustainable goals? Even though I don't want to mislead you, I think all of you in this room would know that there's no way we're achieving sustainable goals. Not today, not tomorrow, not anytime soon. I don't want to depress you, but it's not going to happen. Okay? And it's not the COVID. The COVID is a very good excuse that it's caused us to have delays. I like IDH's approach, namely looking at living income, living wages, although I'm saying when we talk about living wages, we must be careful because that place that I used to lead called the ILO, the trade unions like to talk about living wage, okay? We talk about a minimum wage. Our language, business, is a minimum wage in terms of Convention 131 of the ILO. So Convention 131 of the ILO says you shall establish a minimum wage as determined by the peculiarities of the environment you're in. So the minimum wage here and the minimum wage in Colombia and the minimum wage in Guatemala and the minimum wage in the Congo will never be the same, because there are some unique peculiarities in that particular environment. So we must be careful about the living wage situation. Landscapes are important, food system transformation, and some of you may be going to Geneva at the Transformation Summit. I'll be there because I've been invited, just because I like Geneva. I used to live there. So I'm going to go and maybe attend this with you as well. But how do we create better jobs, better incomes, a better environment, and gender equality for all in South Africa, the African continent, and be a meaningful player in the world? The role of BRICS and intertrade, what is that? 2 weeks ago, my team at Productivity SA, you'll hear I still say my team in spite of the minister. My team at Productivity SA, for the whole year that BRICS is being chaired in South Africa, has been working on ensuring that there is something called an ILO productivity ecosystem for decent work that is going to be the backbone of the BRICS going forward. It was adopted 2 weeks ago on Friday at the BRICS Labour Ministers in Durban. And not only was it adopted, South Africa will be the one that manages it going forward, even when the chairpersonship moves to Russia next year. As it goes, wherever it goes, South Africa will be responsible, which I think for me is a very big legacy project for us. But the question is, how do we get it to work for us? Okay, this ILO ecosystem was originally sponsored by the Swiss, by SECO, the State Economic Department in Switzerland, and also by NORAD, the Norwegians co-sponsored it. But now it's got into BRICS, and the Swiss and the Norwegians also want to play with us. What is the role of the Africa Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Agreement in terms of all the things that we are talking about? In addressing critical challenges in value chains, deforestation, working conditions and wages, value distribution, and climate change, these are all very key. Then I thought, now that I've posed these questions, and I'm going to leave them with you because I don't have too much time. If Lindy gives me time during the question and answers, we can go into those together. Then I thought, let me talk about why there was a name change from the Department of Labor to the Department of Employment and Labor. Do we know, sitting in the room, why there was a name change? Do we know when there was a name change? Do we even know there was a name change? Okay, all right, there was a name change. So it's not called the Department of Labor, it's called the Department of Employment and Labor. It used to be called DOL, it's now called DEL, okay? Before, labor tends to emphasize a lot of inspectorate. It looks at policies. It looks at, just doing things about labor, whether you are good to workers or not, whether you are enabling or not. But once it becomes employment and labor, it follows the trend of the world. So I also used to represent South Africa in all the G20, B20 meetings from 2009 until 2021. And I chaired the employment education task teams of Germany and Italy, okay? And everybody agreed that as we move forward, we can't just talk labor. We need to talk employment with labor. Labor needs to help employment, not the other way around. Labor needs to help employment, not the other way around. If you focus only on an inspectorate and punishing people and telling people what to do, what not to do, it's all right. We need to check some things because some of us are not as good as we should. But ultimately, we need to create employment. We need to make things function. We need to grow the economy. We need to grow South Africa, But what then happens is that Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, in 2019 declared that it shall change its name. This minister I'm fighting with has not in 4 years done anything to change the content of the department. Zero, okay? And I'm tempted to call him things, but I won't today because I respect all of you. But all along what we've done is keep sending him messaging and say, listen, what you need to do is the following. But the more you're sending the messaging on how to change it and change the policies so that we are proactive in creating jobs, he gets upset. He says, I'm condemning his government. I said, well, it's my government too, last time I checked. You can't own the government to yourself. It's mine too, but there are also priorities. Priorities is to make impact and make sure that we make South Africa as proud as it deserves to be. We can't just be proud when the Springboks play and beat France. You guys are slow. You're very slow. I'm worried now. Are you still awake? Okay. So the thing is, for me, is that we need to be able to have impact. And what needs to be changed and what needs to be done to ensure sustainable employment is that we need to change the way we do things. As Einstein would say, you cannot consistently do the same thing repeatedly, get it wrong, but hope for a different and better outcome. That's insanity. We need to change the way we operate. So, you will see in the newspapers, those who read, that the reason he's upset with me is because I came up with a concept that I think is one of the best, quite frankly, and I will get it, whether he likes it or not, but that's a different discussion for a different day, okay? But one of its elements is focusing on agriculture. So you'll see that I say, how do we assure food security and certainty? And I write collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Now, collaboration is something as human beings we've always been drawn to do. It's something we've always had to do. But somehow we needed the COVID to remind us about collaboration. Only when we had the COVID for the first time, people talked, oh, collaboration. Now in 2019, when we had the centenary celebration of the ILO, and congratulations to Agri SA for turning 100. So when we had the centenary of the ILO, we came up with a declaration called the ILO Declaration on the Future of Work. My team and I, my successor now in the IOE, a lady from Germany called Renate Hornung-Draus, was my spokesperson that I worked with. And we managed to get productivity in that document 11 times. Why is this important? Because in the ILO is a bit of a communistic bloc. So when you're there, if you're a business, you are always defending, you're always attacked. But we managed to get productivity in there. And why? Because we know that competitiveness is very important. You guys mentioned it. South Africa, I mentioned to my colleagues last night, is sitting at number 61 out of 64 countries in competitiveness as compiled by the Institute of Management Development in Switzerland. We've been going down for 12 years. We used to be number 44 out of 64. We're now 61, and I told my colleagues that I think we're only 61 because Russia and Ukraine are at war. Okay? And the funny thing is, it tells us what to change, this report. It tells you, if you fix that, rigidity of labor laws, if you fix that, government inefficiency, business inefficiency, it tells you, if you check that and tick, nobody's listening. Not this minister, not many people. Innovation, disruption, and impact, absolutely key. But how do you innovate when your technology gets introduced somewhere else in the world? And we take 36 to 40 months, I was told yesterday, before it can come to South Africa. Then I heard earlier that even our products take forever to be approved to go out. Now, this is something that needs to be changed, but it can only change with collaboration, because all of us have to collaborate and change the way things work. Don't be intimidated by these little labeling things that people do. You know how people disable you? They say you are arrogant, and then you want to defend. You are racist. Then, oh, you are chauvinist, and then you can't talk. You can't say the things you're supposed to say. Don't be fooled by these little labels. Productivity I've mentioned already, and I'm running out of time. BRICS I've mentioned already. We can come back to it in terms of how intra-trade can maybe help us as we move forward. If we also help the guy at the Africa Free Continental Agreement, because he's a South African, a very good South African called Wamkele, who also was not supported by the South African government, even though he's South African, but he made it in spite of South Africa. Okay? Focusing on working with people who know, and also working with those who know they don't know. Because that's very important. A lot of our guys in authority who think they are leaders don't know what they don't know. They have no clue that they have no clue. So now, how do you start helping somebody who doesn't even know that, as my late uncle would call it, is an ignoramus? You can't do that, right? Creating access to markets for marginalized and informal sectors. I heard you talk about it. My time has run out. 7, government collaboration plus business collaboration plus labor and civil society collaboration equals sustainability. Competitiveness, economic growth, and lots of jobs. That was the end, Lindy.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Professor Mthunzi. Your inputs are always so valuable, and your experience speaks for the contribution that you make to this topic, and thank you very much for that. And I think before we go around and get some questions, I want to throw in a tough one.
Sorry?
I want to throw in a tough question.
You want to throw a tough question? Okay, let me move away so I can be upset far away from you.
So earlier we had the conversation about wages, And you being here in sometimes talking in the capacity from Productivity South Africa, also talking in the capacity from your experience from the labour organisations. In agriculture, we struggle to find that. Wages are a difficult component when we have to have discussions about costs and that sort of things. We do acknowledge, we being the sector, do acknowledge that a living wage or a decent wage, decent work, all those concepts are very important. But the wage bill makes it very difficult. In an environment where you have unskilled labourers, not enough skilled labourers, and then we need to have those conversations to mix those two. So the question to you is, how can you guide us on finding that level of productivity in your labour force to make it worth it for the wage bill?
So I don't think that's a tough question. I think it's pregnant with multiple twins. I'm thinking, so the thing I didn't talk about, for example, this afternoon is informality, which is a topic close to my heart. Because I thought if I go into it, I'll be too passionate and I'll go off tangent. Because, you know, the South African economy, you must remember, about 35% of it is formal. 65% is informal, right? And we have very incorrect and inaccurate ways, very flawed ways of approaching informality, which is something I would like to talk about on a different day. But even I at the ILO was fighting that in terms of resolution, I think 204, resolution 205 of the ILO, in terms of informality, we talk about how we must transition people from the informal sector to the formal sector, which is not very practical, but I'll leave it hanging because of these many questions you've asked me in one. Now, in terms of Convention 131, you heard me say that the coming up with the right kind of wage for every environment depends on the peculiarity of that particular environment. You have to look at the standard of living in that environment. You have to look at the available resources in that environment. You have to look at the size of the economy and what it is we're trying to achieve. You guys here, I wasn't here when you did the minimum wage. I was away, and you now have it, right? But the reality of it as well, and why I mention informality at the same time, is that you also mentioned unskilled force. Now, the unskilled workforce, remember, is all our collective responsibility to skill too, right? Mm-hmm. But there's so many competing interests. So if you've got this big wage bill, it's also difficult now to go and do the training you're supposed to do. And I think for me, what helps is to have flexibility. And you can't have flexibility when you are dealing with people who don't know what they don't know. That's why you have rigidity. That's why everything must be treated the same way, you know. So even if you're an SMME that has 5, employees, or you're an SME that employs 40 people, or you're sort of a medium company, you're expected to do the same. So for me, my advice would be that first you need to challenge the ideological problems we have in this country. The ideological problem is killing us. We're run by people from the South African Communist Party who don't even have a following. Right? But for some reason, they're still part of the tripartite something, whatever it's called, right? So for me, you can't, when you have an ideological problem with a person who doesn't know what he doesn't know. I mean, this is a double incapacitation, right? Hope to change anything. Yeah. But some of you guys are also too comfortable, I'm sorry to say, with continuing the way we do things. We won't get involved in politics. I'll just sit in my corner here. You know, I won't upset the guys, because if I upset the guys, it might affect this. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a practical way of doing things. For me, my experience is that the more you avoid things and stay in the corner and don't challenge the flawed problems that are besetting and are messing us up, it gets worse. We keep going down. And the example is this competitiveness I'm talking about. That's now 61 out of 64. The entrepreneurial erosion we have, where entrepreneurs in South Africa and Africa, from an innovative point of view, we still have the highest take-up in innovative startups, but we have the highest failure rate. right? Why? Because there's no enabling of the environment for us to be able to do those things. So I'm also answering you with multiple twins, right? Because it's not a simple question. It's not something we can answer in 2 minutes. But I'm there as a friend, and the project that the minister is fighting me about, by the way, so when you read the newspapers, I did an interview earlier today. Hopefully it will be balanced this time for the first time on Sunday in City Press. Yeah, because it's been messed up. I had to attack the editors yesterday and say, sorry, come on. Are they paying you? What's happening? You know? So the guy said, no, we'll come and give you an interview. So they did. We'll see what happens on Sunday. But it's called Tuja. It's got 8 sectors of the economy, agriculture and aquaculture being one of them. So I will be knocking on the Agri SA door soon, because it's going to happen. And for me, as an ecosystem that we've built, I think has elements that when we collaborate, especially with people that are experts, who know what they don't know and who know what they know, we can all maybe find a way of being catalysts of change. Because that's how change works, right? It's one step at a time. It's one brick at a time. And they tell you that Rome wasn't built in one day. But nobody tells you that a brick was laid every day. But are we laying the bricks for change is the question we must ask ourselves as we sit here. Are we? Or are we sitting and waiting for Godot?
Very valid points. There's a question there, and
that gentleman always asks the question.
And there's the next question.
I'm always asking questions.
Yeah.
The mic works and it helps.
I think it works now. Unless you have a steward.
Thank you.
Shop steward voice.
I don't think anybody here today is not concerned about the low employment levels in this country. The fact that the people in this country are becoming dependent on the state through the grant and the welfare systems and losing dignity in the same breath. And that's concerning. You've touched on something that I wanted to ask, and it's this tri-party alliance where you have a very strong labour component within government, the unions. Their only concern is to protect members' benefits and protect their members and improve the benefits. They're not there to create employment. And how do you see this balancing out? And you've sort of alluded to it with government that's actually tasked with creating an environment where we can create employment. And I sit here and I think in terms, and I share with Derek, if we can have a 5% unemployment rate in this country, for we as farmers, what that would mean to us from producing goods, selling goods, increasing the living standards of people across the country, and minimum wage wouldn't be a topic anymore. So perhaps you can talk. You've alluded to that. You said 35% regulated, 65% unregulated. Are we not over-regulated? Despite we being part of these organizations that look at minimum wages, etc., how do we take the formal regulation part to be a catalyst as opposed to an inhibitor to development and investment in this country? And that we can focus on agriculture and tourism as industries that aren't sunset industries as mining and some of the others are. Thank you.
What's your name, sir?
Richard.
Richard. So Richard, I want to first correct the terminology I use. After leading the ILO and working with 187 countries every day, if I use regulated and non-regulated, my members would have killed me. Because I used to be the voice for everybody. So if I would say regulated or unregulated, the guys would go mal. I simply talked about informal and formal, not regulated. Formal is formal by virtue of the fact that they're registered with UIF, they're registered with PAYE, they're registered with SAR, all those kind of things. And then the other ones, informal, is the part of the world wherever you go, you find in the back roads, they're selling, from the corners and places where they don't necessarily have a fixed place with fixed structures and so on and so on. But I'm going to tell you something interesting. So the same project, I didn't mean to talk about my project, but you're forcing me to. So the same project that the minister is unhappy about, which is, by the way, conceived because of the change from Department of Labor to Department of Employment and Labor, and him failing to come up with employment policies, 0 employment policies. So he's like, there's nothing. So instead of being excited and congratulating some of us who are trying to give him a sneak preview into what he needs to do, he gets upset, right? But the UIF, pre-COVID, nobody really was paying attention to the UIF. And the project, the concept that we built was built on the understanding that when you watch the UIF as a labor expert, it's running out of money like we run out of electricity and running out of water in the country. Why is it running out of money? All of us, I'm sure, can work it out. So if unemployment was 20% before the global financial crisis, and then when we leave the financial crisis, it's sitting at 27%, and then we go into the COVID, it goes to 30-something%, and whatever the case may be, it means the UIF is not collecting as much as it used to collect before. So at some point, the UIF collected 17 billion from us, took 10 billion to the PIC to invest, 7 billion to the people that we are saying cannot be people who rely on being given stuff all the time. But now it's having less and less that it's collecting, but it's having more and more that it's paying, it's having less and less that it's investing. Okay? So it was formed on that basis. When I approached them, I said, listen, we can't work like this. And then the COVID happened, they spent 64 billion, and all of a sudden, like, oops, shucks, we are going to run out of money. Okay? Now, on the database of the UIF, we have 700,000 unemployed people today. 700,000. I'm not talking about the ones on the database of the Department of Employment and Labor. Those are 6 million. Okay? That database is over 6 million. These 700 have hope. Why are they having hope? So 80% of them are on unemployment benefits, right? But you know the UIF is supposed to be like a, what do you call it, like a place you go to for a short while and then you must move on. But now they can't move on and they also don't know how to drop them. And some of these people are getting the UIF but also getting the social development amount as well and the temporary employee relief scheme for COVID and all of these things. So it becomes a nice business, right? But the 700,000, if you take them and work from them, the good thing about them in sales talk, you call them low-hanging fruit. Because all of them have training of some sort. It may not be training good for agriculture, but it's training nevertheless. It's people who've worked, they have experience. So what you need to do is to take this lingo out of Davos, all these people that go to Davos. I'm sorry, I know 1 or 2 people went to Davos here, I saw them. But I've never gone to Davos because I think it's a bit fake, right? So Davos will tell you about the 4th Industrial Revolution and the future of work. Until you ask, I asked the guy, I forget the guy who started Davos, the World Economic Forum, I asked him at a cocktail. I said to him, what are you talking about? What exactly are you saying when you talk 4th Industrial Revolution? I want to understand. No, you know, the global inequalities of the world. I said, no, don't give me that. Give it to somebody else. What do you mean, right? Now, what really it should be meaning, and to your question of unskilled people, is that because we have this 4th Industrial Revolution, we need to demystify these big words and take people who are in mining, for instance, but mining is no longer absorbing them. And we need to assess their skills. We need to identify whether they have other skills, whether they can be entrepreneurs or whatever they can be, and retrain them and walk with them into the next place, incubate them, handhold, do whatever, so that people have dignity. So my mother, in the rural villages of the Eastern Cape, if I were to say to him 4th Industrial Revolution, he wouldn't know what I'm talking about. In fact, all the people where I grew up would think Mthunzi's lost his mind. He went to school and now he's lost his mind. But all we need to do is to retrain our people, put them in the industries that will absorb them. And agriculture is a typical, I don't want to call it easy, I don't want to insult you, because I know these days you need graduates as well to operate your technology and stuff. But there's some elements of it that don't need that, right? And not all of us can be technologists. Not all of us can be, have degrees and whatever. But for me, if we are looking for low-hanging fruit and an industry that would be able to help in the quickest possible way, given the land we have and the vastness of it, and you guys as the farmers who know what you're doing, that would be a quick win. But to do that, you need, I don't know where the DG is, you need the DG, Agriculture, I hope he's here somewhere. You need, okay, he's gone. So you need him to talk to the DG at the Department of Employment and Labor about these employment policies. You need trade and industry because they deal with these bad negotiations and whatever as to who gets chicken and who doesn't get chicken and who gets subsidized and who doesn't get subsidized, right? You need education, small business development as well. So without an aligned kind of collaborative model that says we are Team South Africa together, we are attacking the thing called poverty together. We are attacking the thing called lack of food certainty together. we're not going to win. So I think I want to stop because I see Lindy's getting nervous now with time.
I have another question there coming. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. I think you already covered my question as well in your insights. So we've seen a trend of renaming, policies redrafted, conferences, symposiums, but through those, we never see the actual implementation. What needs to happen? My question is, what needs to happen for us to see actual implementation of the policies and the symposiums that happen, the conferences? Because all we've seen is we don't see the implementation coming from that.
Well, that question is a very good question, but at the same time, it's not as easy as all that. I mean, I could write a thesis just on that in itself. But, you know, when this ILO ecosystem, this ILO productivity ecosystem on decent work was started just after the 2019 centenary celebration, the ambassador of Switzerland to the ILO, a lady by the name of Valérie Besset-Becher, she came to me, she said to me, listen, Norway wants to do this, but it wants to do it with Vietnam and Ghana. And we as Switzerland want South Africa. So I said, well, what are you telling me? He says, no, you're chairman of Productivity SA. I said, yes, but I'm hated for it, for speaking out. If I speak out, I'm condemning the government. So why would you come to me? You know this. She says, no, because we'd rather work with a side that takes us into the light, she says. And then she said, we must work together to get South Africa. Do you know why they didn't want South Africa, the Norwegians? They said we talk too much and never do anything. Okay? And it's true, right? You've seen how we do well when somebody tells us to do something. The World Cups on cricket or football or rugby, because somebody's carrying a whip and smacking us. It's not us making the decision. So to answer you very simply is that change and impact needs disruption. Change and impact needs disruption. Innovation, by virtue of innovation, is disruptive. Technology brings disruption all the time. It's not a bad thing because it forces us to think and to play and catch up and run and make things happen. Okay? So you, from where I am, you'll forgive me, my eyes are a bit old. I'm an old man, I just don't look it. So you look like a young man. Your voice sounds like a young man. I think you young guys, you know that this thing is not working. You know that some of us were indoctrinated, right? Like the old National Party guys were indoctrinated, the ANC guys, like me, were indoctrinated, okay? So even when we know something's wrong, we hesitate to get involved. We'd rather stand and not make a decision. You guys need to fight. And I think it's Beyonce that says something like, power is not given, power is taken. You guys need to take the power and make sure there's implementation. But even the implementation we talk about, when you have no employment policy, there's nothing really to implement. You have a vacuum, you have a lacuna. In law, we call it a lacuna, right? So you need to find a way of actually going in there and saying, can we please restructure this thing? This thing is not going to take us to the promised land. I hope I've answered you.
Thank you very much. I think we need to keep this one short, so it's the last question, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
But ask him he must ask me a simple question.
Yeah, simple question and a one-line answer.
Yeah, I don't know about a simple question, but I think what we need to do is to get a master plan and to go to the departments, a master plan in labour. And I think you're definitely one of the first guys that we will contact and sit down with to take this further. Thanks so much for your presentation.
But what you'll have to do is also get me bodyguards. I'm already in big trouble.
Mthunzi, I think he hit the nail there right on, because it's the organisation, Agri SA, as well as the sectors broad, need partners, because there's more ministers that need a brush down. And you are the ideal partner in it with your input and understanding of this environment. And we want to say thank you very much for your inputs here and your thought-provoking ideas that we need to put forward. And we look forward to partnering with you to address these.
And I say I accept.
Yeah.